Hey everyone, Mick here, and welcome to another episode. It's been a while, and I apologize. I have been super busy, and the other side of that is I have had some creative roadblocks. Trying to come up with a good way of illustrating these next episodes has been difficult for me. Can't draw, I can't paint, I can't animate things, like I'm horrible at all that. So yeah, it took some time. I have to build props, and it took a few tries. Even the props I have for this episode I'm not entirely happy with, but they're gonna work. I had some ideas with it that just didn't pan out, but we're gonna make do with it. So let's go ahead, let's move forward and get through this episode. So in the previous episodes, we talked about what soil is. So what soil is made up of. We looked at the individual classifications of parts of soil, and we also talked about compaction and how soil compacts differently when it's dry versus when it's wet. So now we're going to talk about what soil does when it's dry and granulated and it's piled. So that's what's called angle of repose. So the angle of repose, that angle that it gets when you start piling dry granulated soil, is based off of its inherent mechanical properties. So depending on the type of soil, how much air gap it has, the actual shape of the granules themselves. So in this instance, let's see, do I have this in shot here? Yeah, let's get that there. In this instance, I have a few 4 rocks here. They represent sand granules. So on this side we have these irregular shapes. They're pretty rough, jagged edges. And on this side, a nice smooth, worn out, worn down, more rounded. So if you think about these as individual sand particles, they just like to go places. So you got that, and then you have these, they just kind of, they're easy to, they just kind of stay in their spot. So if we were to talk about this in a more of a soil science type of, they call the difference of these between well-graded and poorly graded. So well-graded soils are going to be this. They're going to be jagged edges, irregular, rough. That's how well graded is. Poorly graded is going to be this. It's going to be rounded. So think of a bag of marbles. You can't stack a bag of marbles, but you could stack a bag of cubes. So just wanted to touch base on that real quick, because it does have a lot to do with your angle of repose, among other factors. Like I said, density of the soil, your air gap. Yeah. So moving forward with doing some testing here, I have this pan here to kind of keep things contained, and I've made a mess already. By the way, if you want to do this at home, I suggest, if you have a significant other around that is not as enthusiastic about this as you, that you do this outside. So we have this little thing. Originally it was designed to have a funnel on the top. It was a little bit too high. I was trying to make it easy and cheap, and that didn't work out quite as well. So I want to make sure this is in good frame here. It is. We have an 80 by 80, as close to 80 by 80 as I could get. So I have it written down there, 80.01 by 79.97. So we're just going to say 80 by 80. I have making use of a Starbucks cup, since we can't really use those anymore outside of, you can use them at home. And then I got 2 types of sand here. I have coarse sand and some finer but not completely fine sand. It's a kind of a medium coarse. So we're going to start off with the coarse sand here, and we're just going to pour it in here. I'll fill this up here. Ooh, some fines. You see that there? It's pretty coarse. And we're going to start piling it up. Got it on here. And we're going to go up until it essentially won't pile any further and it just flows off. You'll see it just kind of sheeting off. Look at that. It's not getting any higher. Even if I get closer to it and go more gently, it's just not getting any higher. So we can take this and we can use some math here. I know. It's the reason I got the scientific calculator. So we know that this is 80 millimeters across. So all we have to do is figure out at a right angle the height and do an inverse tangent, and we can figure out what the actual slope of this is. So if we take this and we go down here like this until it just touches the top, we're at 54. So if we take 54, the distance from the base of this to the top of this plate is actually 24. So I've already measured that. So if we take 54 minus the 24, that leaves us with 30, right? So if we go through that and we do an inverse tangent, inverse tangent, so height, which is going to be 30, divide that by the width of the base, which is going to be 40, remember, because we're doing a right angle. And we solve that, we get 36.8699. So 37, we're just going to round up. So that is a 37-degree angle at which this particular material settles at. So we're going to go ahead and clean this off real quick. Move this over here. And I don't really want to mix these up yet, so they might come in useful. And I'll pour this back in here. You know, I probably could just got away with doing a couple of these. I think I have another one of these Starbucks mugs laying around. Anyway, okay, we're going to put this back in here. Put this back here. Check you here. Nice and in focus, in frame. Move you over here so I don't knock it off. And now we're going to use some fine sands here. So here's the fine sands. See that? It's pretty. Like I said, it's not the finest of what we classify as fine sand, but it's kind of medium. And we're going to just go through this whole process again. Let me try to get so I'm not blocking it. Yeah. Here I am trying not to spill things too much. And we're just going to go up. Look at this. You can probably already tell that it's going a little bit higher. It's closer. It's not getting any higher. So you can actually see how it's just sloughing off in like sheets now. So let's go through that whole process again. Let's measure this out and see what we get. Let's try and get right there. I don't know if you can see the numbers here, but hopefully you can. And we just barely touched it there at 64. 64. Wow. So that actually means we're at, I don't even have to do the math there because that just leaves us with 40 left. So if we take 64 minus the 24, that leaves us with 40. And since this is 40, you know, that's a 45-degree angle. Like I don't even have to do the math on the calculator there. So close to a 45-degree angle. So yeah. So think about that. We went from a 37-degree angle, right? 37? Yep, 37 degrees to a 45 just by going into the next, you know, if we this is the next sieve down from the coarse sands. So that's actually pretty impressive. So other things that you get a 45-degree angle at is like crushed rock. So crushed rock tends to have an angle of repose of about 45 degrees. So why that's important to know, by the way, is we'll get into, when we start talking about bench construction or bench maintenance, a lot of the times The reason why the bench needs more maintenance has to do with the angle of repose. And I know this sounds kind of, out there, but it really is. So you have this inherent angle, and what tends to happen, sorry, I'm trying to clean this up a little while I'm talking. What tends to happen is you end up with this angle that is, you end up with a bench, and a lot of new trail builders, even veteran trail builders, tend to do this. And what that is they envision this trail being, if you straightened it completely out, the tread, they mix up and think that the tread and the bench are the same thing. So you have this trail, and it just goes like this. You straighten it out, drew it out in two lines to represent it. It's going to be straight, like two parallel lines. They don't take into account the actual side slope. So the way a trail should look, if you straighten it out, it should do this. And the reason why is if you're going through different types of terrain, different soil types, different slopes, side slopes, your bench is going to change. Your bench has to change. It has to support the tread. So if you're, let's go back to that example, that 45-degree angle that gravel is. Build trail, I visualize that the tread sits 6 inches above the bench. And the reason why is if you were building a raised trail bed and you were using gravel and it was 6 inches above, that would mean that you would have to have 6 inches of shoulder to each side, 45-degree angle of repose, correct? So that means that, and you've probably heard, I think I might have mentioned this before in the past, in one of the past episodes, where I said that if I have an 18-inch tread, the minimum I build my bench is 30 inches. Why? 45 degrees, 6 inches, 6 inches, 12 inches, plus 18 inches is 30. So that's the minimum width you want your tread to be. So as you start building trail and you get into these side slope areas, you have to take into account that angle of repose because you've now disrupted the soil. And so slopes are typically at a higher angle than their actual inherent angle of repose because it's compacted soil. It has vegetation on it, has other things in it that might be larger rocks and stuff that's holding it in place. But the moment you disturb that soil, you now have these 2 points at which, in the side slope, they're going to erode over time. So you want to be able to make sure, even though you're cutting a back slope into it, you're just minimizing the amount of erosion that's going to happen, but it's still going to erode a little, and you still have that little bit of erosion that's going to happen on your downslope side. So keep that in mind. You can kind of figure this out how wide your bench has to be. And when we get into bench construction, we'll kind of dive into that more. But I wanted to give you like the basics of why that's important right now. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Hopefully you learned something from this episode. It is quite a bit to talk about. So moving forward, we're going to go into the next chapter. We're going to be talking about water and how it actually affects all of this. So we're going to take everything we just learned about soil, and now we're going to apply water as a dynamic to it, and how water reacts to soil and how soil reacts to water, and why certain things are done with trail design to mitigate the damage and erosion that happens from water. So hopefully you tune in for those episodes, and looking to do them the next, might be 2 weeks, might be another month away. Like again, it's all about getting these props built, and hopefully I have Josh around with me on that, and we can have some fun with it. So until next time, and thank you very much.